Hello everyone! Today I will be reacting to a video posted by a content creator called Trenton titled "Studying Kanji is a waste of time." These reaction videos are going to be much longer than my other content, which will mostly be shorter than 5 minutes, so I hope that people who watch my reaction will appreciate the viewpoint of someone who has pursued research in the field of kanji for around 10 years. Saying that, this doesn't automatically make all of my arguments bulletproof, and yeah, I will be grateful for your insight into my commentary. So feel free to point out anything you disagreed with in the comment section. Let's get started.
You read the title, yes, studying kanji is a waste of time. Let me explain. Now, why is it that most people are terrified of Japanese? Kanji. Yeah, everyone's scared of kanji.
Yeah, that's fair. Most people are terrified of kanji, that's true.
You've probably heard people be like, oh, Japanese? Yeah, that language is crazy. They have like 9 million characters or something, and each of those characters can be read in like 80 different ways. I heard it takes like 212 years to learn, and that's just to a basic level. It seems like the fear around specifically learning kanji is just a little bit overblown, and I'm here to tell you that it's still pretty hard actually. But it's not as hard as you think it is. The reason why so many people struggle with kanji specifically is because they've been told to use methods which are just straight up.
Oh yeah, I love how some textbooks list kanji with a common component. So in this case, it would be the kanji for number 10, Ju, and you are somehow supposed to be able to identify it in kanji like birth, for example. It's a pure madness. Okay, let's continue.
Inefficient. Like, if you've ever been to a Japanese class, then they probably gave you a sheet of paper with a list of individual kanji on it and all of their stroke orders and readings, and then the teacher said, learn these by our quiz next week. Now, this is an extreme example, and if you've spent
Yeah, sure, but it happens. So, fair point.
any time self-studying, then you know that classroom curriculums are super slow, and honestly, if you're going to try to rely solely on a class, you would probably never actually get to the point of being able to read real Japanese. At least
Oh, yeah, for sure, but that's the case with basically anything. It's the same, for example, in the case of English, like Japanese are not able to properly learn English just by going to school and attending those classes, right? So, yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all.
it's not without looking up every other word. Even with some of the resources that are popular nowadays, like remembering the kanji or wanikani, which I know a lot of people will swear by, there's a fundamental flaw that makes most people who study kanji waste way more time than they need to. Look at this kanji. It's notorious for having
Okay, it's funny that every video in which a person talks about how difficult learning kanji is due to the number of readings shows the kanji for life as an example. It's the kanji with the highest number of readings, and only 6 kanji out of 2136 joyo have more than 5 common readings. So let me reiterate, 6 out of over 2000. In fact, 70% of kanji have only 1 or 2 readings. So yeah, these kind of examples are quite misleading in my opinion.
tons of readings to the point where Japanese people like to use sentences like this to quiz foreigners. This is one of those things that makes people say Japanese is such a hard language. Even Chinese, which is where Japan got all of these characters from in the first place, at least for the most part, has consistent readings for each individual character, so once you learn a character, you should know how to read it pretty consistently. When learning kanji,
Oh, yeah, that's right. For example, I'm able to read like 99% of Japanese words consistently as well. However, I'm not going to pretend that readings are not a bit trickier in Japanese than in Chinese.
In Japanese, so many people will go to learn an individual character, learn all of the radicals used in the character, learn the abstract meaning of it, learn all of the readings for the character.
Wait, what? This is a horrible example. Like, these two are just alternative versions of Muzukashi, and Gatai is the voice version of Katai. Those are not different readings, so the kanji has actually 3 readings instead of 6. Or I mean like 3 kunyomi, right? Like Katai, Muzukashi, and Nikui. And then the onyomi nan. Man, this is what happens when you don't spend enough time looking for a proper example. You can actually check the standard readings in the officially published Joyo kanji list, which unsurprisingly lists only 3 readings, so even Nikui is not included there. Okay, let's continue. Not a good example at all, quite misleading to be honest.
And then see a new word that uses it and still not know how to read it.
Yeah,
So you might be thinking, okay, how are you supposed to know which reading of the character to use then? Here's the thing, you don't. You just have to know it.
Well, that's not entirely true. Sometimes you can figure out the reading. In fact,
Which
if the previously mentioned kanji follows the stem of a verb, it is always read as gatai instead of muzukashi. However, there is also the reading nikui, which has the same function as gatai, and distinguishing between those two might seem a bit random. On the other hand, there is no duality in the case of yasui, for example, to be easy. So if you see a word like nomiyasui, you know how it's read, although yasui is always written in hiragana anyway in cases like this. So yeah. All in all, claiming that the reading selection is basically random is a pure hyperbole.
begs the question, why are people still studying individual kanji when they could just learn the words that the kanji are used in? Like, if you think about it for a second, if instead of spending all of your time memorizing the abstract meaning of a single character and all
Well, I highly doubt that anyone is learning like all of these abstract meanings. But yeah, I guess sometimes you have to learn some of them for the test and stuff like that. So it's not entirely uh, a bad point, but yeah, a bit overblown, I would say.
of its different readings and radicals, and then doing that thousands of times for each character, and instead just learned words as you came across them, then you're gonna get to the same end goal just a lot quicker and a lot easier, and without so much pointless memorization. If you want to actually become able to understand written Japanese at some point, then you're gonna have to learn tens of thousands of words anyway, so why not just skip the dedicated kanji study and just memorize vocab from the start?
Uh, whoa, not sure whether that was a rhetorical question, but let me answer. There are several reasons for why learning huge amount of vocabulary right from the get-go is not a viable option for most people, but let me highlight the main one, right? Well, people learning other languages can only imagine how extremely time consuming and mentally draining it is to open a Japanese textbook or well, Japanese book and try to read it without at least the intermediate level of kanji knowledge. Sure, one might argue that after a few days you might remember a few words which frequently appear, but I hardly doubt that most people would enjoy learning a language in this manner. Just consider this, right? Why would I waste 100 hours reading a book by looking up basically every word, at least at the beginning, if I can spend 50 hours learning 200 most frequent kanji and then read the same book in let's say 40 hours and enjoy it a bit more.
Should also mention really quick that this is about learning how to read the characters, not learning how to write them. It's not really the most practical idea to spend all of your time and energy learning how to write kanji, which you can't even read yet in most situations. So you're going to save yourself a ton of time and effort if you just wait until you're already fluent in the written language before going back and learning how to write. This is why
I agree with Trenton here, but how the hell can you be fluent in the written language if you can't write? There are people who claim to be fluent in written and spoken Japanese, and then you find out that they can't properly write a single short sentence. Their argument would be that writing doesn't matter these days and that being able to read is enough. And well, that's a fair point, but that doesn't give you the right to claim to be fluent in written Japanese if your kanji look like something that crawled out of a horror movie.
you shouldn't spend your time learning stroke order or radicals, because if you're just trying to read the characters, then they're not really going to be that much help to you. Maybe knowing a radical might help you distinguish one kanji from another one, but honestly, the payoff for learning specific radicals isn't really that much when you're considering just learning how to read the characters. So if you're only learning how to read, then I wouldn't bother messing with stroke order or radicals yet. So one of the
Yeah, that's a fair point. I would argue that stroke order might be helpful for improving the long-term retention of kanji, since you are also activating the muscle memory. But radicals are borderline useless these days in the era of electronic dictionaries.
reasons that I came to this conclusion is that I actually tried doing dedicated kanji study towards the beginning of learning Japanese, and I was using RTK for this.
Of course, every content creator on YouTube tried RTK. In case you are not familiar with the abbreviation RTK, it means remembering the kanji, which is a very popular kanji textbook wrote by Heisek. I am not going to talk about it in this video, but there are some elements I like about it and some I don't. I will definitely dedicate a video to it at some point, as it was and still is a popular kanji learning resource.
It felt like no matter how many kanji I tried to brute force into my head, nothing was sticking, it was really boring, it didn't feel like it was helping, and eventually I just gave up and started learning vocabulary with Anki. I found that just memorizing words by themselves and spending enough time with the language was enough for me to learn how to read Japanese eventually. And I sort of had this realization that studying kanji individually is just a huge waste of time. Now I can already hear the keyboards of the people in the comments typing, but wait a minute, you can't just say studying kanji is useless. My Japanese teacher said this, or I learned kanji like this, you can't just...
Oh yeah, Japanese teachers say a lot of things which usually doesn't make sense. Unfortunately, some of them are usually specialized in some other area, for example, religion, history, or literature. So they don't really have an overview of kanji research and studies and stuff like that, unfortunately.
say that your method is better than everyone else's. What proof do you have? So other than the
Oh,
fact that I live...
oh, this is a great game actually. Used to be harder back in the old days, but still, thumbs up for including it. It's called Kanji de Go.
literally learned to read kanji without ever studying it, take it from this guy. He's a
Oh no, I saw a few videos from that Japanese guy and I found most of them not very useful and some straight up misleading, to be honest.
Japanese teacher who's gotten pretty popular on YouTube recently, and I actually think his videos are super helpful, specifically for people who are in that intermediate stage who know...
I would say one in maybe four of his videos might be helpful, but fair enough. It's your opinion, and yeah, he has a significant number of views, so like over 200,000 subscribers. So yeah, decent.
A lot of Japanese, but maybe haven't picked up on a lot of the nuances yet. Now, a while back, he made this video.
Oh shit, there's so many kanji. Thousands of kanji, and each kanji usually has more than one reading. How can I remember all the kanji? Dude, you don't need to study kanji to learn Japanese. Just learn vocabulary. Even if you memorize all the readings of all the kanji there, you still wouldn't be able to read Japanese.
Yeah, I actually don't completely disagree with the title of this video. Like at some point in your Japanese studies or your Japanese language studies, you will start to focus on vocabulary and you will stop learning kanji. But this doesn't mean that it's a good method from the beginning. So I don't know. To me, it seems that like both Trenton and this Japanese guy, Kaname, are trying to apply a method which is useful mostly for advanced learners to beginner level learners, which doesn't seem reasonable to me at all.
Reading of the first kanji is o, ko, sho, chisai. And the second one is gaku, manabu. And the last one is ikiru, nama, ki, se, sho. Yeah, so even if you learn all the kanji out there, it's useless. You still...
Naturally, it's not useless because there are kanji which have only a single reading, as I mentioned previously. In fact, about 1/3 of all over 2000 kanji, well, Joyo kanji, have only one reading. In the Shogakuse example, even a beginner level learner would be able to tell the reading of the second kanji, and that it is gaku, because that's the only onyomi the kanji has. And even if they can't deduce the correct reading of the other two kanji, they can easily look up the word using the reading of the second kanji.
wouldn't be able to read a word.
When I saw this video for the first time, I was honestly thinking, oh my god, somebody finally said what I've been thinking this whole time. So if you don't
Yeah, and you are both wrong.
believe me when I say don't study kanji, then take this guy's word for it. Okay, so I've talked a lot about words and using vocabulary as a means to learn kanji. But what does this process actually look like? So first you need to find some way to reliably learn words, and I highly recommend using Anki for this.
Yeah, Anki is great. A very good recommendation.
But if you really don't like Anki to the point where it just makes you want to give up and quit, then it's not necessary. And a lot of people commented on my last videos that they don't like Anki, so if you don't want to use it, then you don't have to. But I think the benefits strongly outweigh the negatives, so I would highly recommend it. While you're learning words, you're also going to want to be reading as much as you can, because reading is really what's going to solidify your knowledge. These two activities really complement each other, so you're going to be making a lot of progress if you're practicing reading and memorizing vocab on the side at the same time. Not literally while you're reading, you're doing your Anki reps, but you know what I mean. When you first start looking at kanji, they're going to look like...
Okay, once again, a misleading example that contains kanji which don't really exist.
like a bunch of random scribbles to you, and you're not really going to be able to tell the difference between them that easily. But
You are going to be able to tell the difference. It's just that sometimes they can mix up in your head and you will remember the incorrect one, but yeah, like you can tell the difference. Anyone can tell the difference, to be honest.
the more words you learn and the more time you spend trying to differentiate kanji, they're going to become more and more clear to you. When you've picked up a few thousand vocabulary words and you're becoming more and more familiar with the written language, you're going to automatically notice yourself being able to guess the readings of kanji and words that you've never even seen before.
I think I get what Trenton wanted to say here, but it doesn't really make sense if you think about it for a while. Using the method they mentioned, how exactly are you supposed to figure out the reading or the meaning of a kanji you have not seen before? Like, how would you figure out the meaning of these words, for example? The funny thing is that if you learn kanji, sometimes you can actually figure out the reading of a kanji that you have not encountered before, because some kanji contain phonetically transparent components that should help you correctly determine the reading of an unknown kanji.
Just because you know those same characters from other words which you've already learned. At the point I'm at now with Japanese, most of the new words that I learn are composed of kanji, which I've seen many times already, so it's usually not difficult.
Wait, what happened here? Trenton highlighted the word Seisakuiki, but the software displayed Sekido instead. Well, never mind.
To guess how they're read, despite never having seen them before. So now you're probably thinking, wait a minute, hold on. Just a second ago you said that you just have to know it, or else you don't know how to read a kanji. So how are you guessing how they're read? What's up with that? Well, what I said is still true. You can never be 100% sure without just looking it up in a dictionary, but there are some things you can do to drastically.
Okay, let me go back to the part where they mentioned that there is no way to figure out which reading should be used. Where was it? I think it was around here, right?
You don't. You just have to know it. Which begs the question,
Okay.
why? Okay, how are you supposed to know which reading of the character to use then? Here's the thing, you don't. You just have to know it.
Okay, so you don't know unless you know. Man, I see this actually quite often these days in YouTube videos. Someone will make an absurd claim at the beginning, and then they will say things that contradict the claim or slightly change it. And what's even worse, they will pretend that the claim still stands true. Okay, so let's go back. I believe here. Yeah.
Can do to drastically increase the chance that you guess the reading of a word? Alright, now it's time for class. Everybody sit down and look at the whiteboard. Kanji have what's called kunyomi and onyomi, which are essentially just specifications for which reading is used based on the origin of a word. Kunyomi are for reading native Japanese words, and onyomi are for words which were imported from Chinese.
There is a type of onyomi in which that's not the case, but it's true that the vast majority of onyomi are of Chinese origin.
For example, if you stuck two kanji together like this, there's a high likelihood that it's a Chinese loanword and will be read with the onyomi reading. If you see a word with okurigana, which is just when a word itself has grammar inflection built in, then it's almost always going to be read with the kunyomi reading, as it's almost certainly an original Japanese word. Knowing this can help you make educated guesses on how a
I would not use the word guesses, and since I know what he's going to say, but there are many exceptions to this rule. Sure, there are some exceptions, but in the case of, let's say, proper nouns, if you figure out that they are often read through kunyomi, you don't have to guess that, for example, this word is read as Miyazaki instead of Kyuki.
word is going to be read, but there are many exceptions to this rule, so you can never be 100% sure without confirming it for yourself. Look at this word, meaning tone of voice. Now, if you're like me and you're learning Japanese and you come across this word for the first time, you might make the reasonable assumption that, oh, this could be read as seishoku, because grammatically it's treated the same as a Chinese import word, so it most likely uses the onyomi reading, right? Yeah, it's actually pronounced as kawairo, which uses two kunyomi readings, the first of which is not even how the word in isolation is pronounced.
Yeah, but that's an exception, man. A rare example. You would find that even in other languages, for example, when pronouncing some words. So, yeah.
This sort of thing isn't super rare with normal words, but it is really common with the names of people or places. So even Japanese people will often not know how to read a name that they've never.
Well, sure, However, it is highly likely that such a word, or a proper noun in this case, is rarely used if a Japanese person doesn't know how to pronounce it. I would say that English or American people not knowing the correct pronunciation of rarely used words whose pronunciation is difficult due to their Latin origin or a different reason is a similar case. Japanese people generally do not have to worry about correct pronunciation of words. Instead, they might worry about correctly reading an uncommon proper noun. It's just the difference between languages. Each language has its own exceptions, and yeah, admittedly, in the case of Japanese and proper nouns, it is maybe a bit more pronounced than some other exceptions in some other languages, but well, once again, I would not say that because of that there is no point in learning kanji.
Ever seen before. Because kanji were invented by the Chinese, then brought into Japan over 1,000 years ago and forced into the Japanese language, then underwent tons of changes due to historical events, learning kanji is kind of convoluted to say the least. But if you take the approach of just spending a lot of time with the language and learn vocabulary words as they come up, then you're steadily going to learn to read kanji without
What is going to happen was actually quite faithfully depicted in this scene. Just imagine words instead of kanji. Depending on how much you read, you are going to become overwhelmed by thousands of words because Japanese is one of the most abundant languages in terms of vocabulary. This is supported by the estimated number of words recommended to pass the JLPT N1 exam, which is considered to be the equivalent of the C1 level or between B2 and C1 level. While around 6,000 to 8,000 words are considered enough to achieve the C1 level in most languages, 10,000 words are needed to pass the JLPT N1 exam, or you are expected to know around 10,000 words, so basically what, 25% more. In fact, for the highest level of the Chinese proficiency exam, HSK, the knowledge of only 5,000 words is claimed to be sufficient. So basically, yeah, double what is expected for the Chinese exam.
going to learn to read kanji without having to study them at all? Okay, to show you what I mean, let's look into my Anki deck. I currently have 15,244 words in my deck. And there's actually this really cool add-on called Kanji Grid, which will generate a grid of all of the kanji found in your Anki deck. And by looking at this, you can kind of gauge how many characters are in the words that you know how to read. This isn't really that helpful on a pragmatical level, because really the only way forward is to learn more words. But you can sort your known kanji by JLPT level, kanji ken.
Sorting by the JLPT level is almost useless if you are about intermediate level. There is currently no official list of kanji categorized by their JLPT level, so most lists make use of the system used before 2010 when there were only 4 JLPT levels.
Level, grade level, and so if you're trying to gauge where you're at, then it can be a little bit helpful, I think. To be honest, I think it's just cool to see a big grid of all of the kanji that are in your deck right in front of you and think, wow, I really learned to read all of those just by learning words. There's also this game that got popular on Japanese YouTube like a year ago called Kanji to Go, which is essentially...
Yeah, this game is great. Let me show it one more time. Yeah, for example, here. Yeah, the game is simply great. Used to be a bit more challenging in the past, as me and my girlfriend were barely able to clear the shortest hell level, containing, I believe, 6+1 questions. In fact, we even got t-shirts printed as a commemoration of passing the hell level for the first time. I will post them here. These days, we are able to clear even the hardest level, so it's not as fun anymore, to be honest.
like a year ago called Kanji to Go, which is essentially just a game where you guess kanji readings, and the farther in you go, the harder it gets. So much to the point where Japanese people even struggle on the harder levels.
Oh,
語彙の
yeah.
むにゃむにゃ読む声、読書する声なんですよ。
Yeah,
でも
Goi? I know
読み知ら
as
ない。
well, but
い
idea.
に繋がらないな。なんだ、もったいね。なんだよこれ。あ、威圧の方。作り笑い。おいおい。
作り笑い。
I think the
Yeah,
fact that this
okay.
game even exists in the first place is a telling sign that you shouldn't be learning individual kanji to learn vocabulary words. Honestly, I played this game way too much sitting in the back of my college classes when I should have been taking notes. But that's not important. What's really important is that, hey, this game is pretty cool. If you're trying to learn how to read some unorthodox kanji and test yourself, then maybe go give it a shot. It's kind of neat. Anyways, if you're trying
Definitely give it a shot.
to learn how to read Japanese, don't bother studying kanji. Now, originally, I was going to make this a huge
What a terrible advice, especially for beginners.
comprehensive guide on how to read, but I realized that the contents of a video specifically about kanji and the contents of a video about learning how to read novels are probably not that similar, so I decided to split them into two videos. So if you have a bunch of questions about specifically learning how to read, then I'm making a video about it, don't worry. Anyways, that's about it. Leave any comments you have in the question. Oh my god. Leave any questions you have in the comments and I'll try to answer them. Okay, bye.
Okay, so let's give Trenton a rating based on what they said in the video. I am inclined to give an average rating since there were a few genuinely good pieces of advice, but also some questionable statements. The recommendation to use Anki was fair. The kanji game mentioned is super fun. Statements about not wasting time with radicals and handwriting made sense as well. On the other hand, the method they proposed seems too extreme to be considered potentially effective and useful. I might have been more lenient if they said something in line with, after you learn a certain number of kanji, you should focus solely on vocabulary because it is more effective due to these 2 or 3 reasons. There are also a few misleading examples and contradicting statements, so I would give this video 4 out of 10. Despite several good points about the kanji learning process, the concept of focusing solely on vocabulary right from the beginning is simply flawed. It might be a viable option in languages that do not use Chinese characters, but using the approach suggested by Trenton for learning Japanese is definitely not a good way to become proficient in the language, though I guess it might work for a small minority of dedicated learners who are willing to spend 2 or 3 years grinding Japanese on an everyday basis. I would be willing to give a higher score, let's say 6 or 7 out of 10, if Trenton would suggest less extreme version of the proposed approach, but based on this video I somehow feel they would not do that. Anyway, while 4 out of 10 might seem harsh to some of you, I'm really not a fan of rating systems where the lowest score is 4 or 5. I look at you, IGN, by the way. Honestly, I would not rate my own reaction to this video 10 out of 10. If you disagree with something I said, let me know in the comment section. We will see each other in the next video, so take care.